When you consume and reflect on films from other countries, you often emerge with this newfound sense of understanding and appreciation of other cultures, language and traditions. Perhaps certain actors or filming techniques now resonate with you. You begin to notice the changes that happened throughout each era and how societal or environmental developments were documented. You start to recognize these aspects, even subconsciously, as you continuously watch films from a country that's not your own. I really enjoy this kind of experience, which is why I decided to only watch films from one specific country every day in April. To me, Japan was already familiar, having studied it by myself for years during my school days instead of preparing for exams. By my 20s, I had had the pleasure of experiencing films such as Battle Royale and All About Lily Chocho, and naturally Studio Ghibli, going on further to then watch classics such as House, Ring, Perfect Blue and Swing Girls, which even my dad watched and enjoyed recently. There's something special about sharing foreign films with people that may not have experienced them before. During school, I felt like I had my own secret world. I would arrive into class with the feeling that if I mentioned these films to anyone, no one would know what I'm talking about. I did keep them to myself a lot of the time due to insecurities about my interests, but now I am eager to share my findings and feelings and fondness right here. So therefore, the plan to watch a film every day in April was settled. Although I'm not sure why I thought April would be a good idea, because I was uncharacteristically much busier than usual and it was my birthday. I admittedly fell behind once or twice, but overall I succeeded with watching 30 films within the month of April. The genre I ended up watching the most was drama, with 19 of the films having the label, and I mostly watched films from the 90s, my favourite era. The way I picked the films was by starting off with one on my watch list for the first, and for each subsequent film I would click on a director, or an actor or actress, or even a cinematographer or editor and see where it took me. Some of the films were already on my watch list, and some I had never heard of before. And don't worry, throughout this journey I'm not going to spoil anything. Experiencing a person's creative vision from across the globe years after their project came to fruition feels like a window back in time. What they made 10, 15, 20 or even 50 years ago is miraculously in front of you, on a screen, and those people were there and creating in that specific time, and it really feels like a time capsule. And the older the film, the more fascinating, like looking through a keyhole directly into the past. When I watched Equinox Flower and Ohio, two films from the 50s, I finished them feeling like I had learned a lot, even just by the visuals alone. They're both directed by one of the most influential Japanese directors, Yasujiro Ozu, whose film Tokyo Story is often in lists of the greatest films of all time. Up until this point, I shockingly hadn't watched any Japanese films from the pre-70s, so it was pretty enriching to start learning about these eras through stunning visuals. Ohio is about two boys vowing to stay silent in protest as their parents refuse to buy a television set. Apparently it's loosely based off a silent film Yasujiro Ozu made in the 30s, and this part stood out to me when the characters uttered the lines, "TV will create 100 million idiots and TV sets are a nuisance." Of course, the 50s was the time when TV was starting to replace radio, and this made me think that even now, upon introduction of new technology, there is this worrisome nature over how it will affect the human race. However, despite Ohio having layers of economic worry, gossip, generational gaps and fart jokes, it's all tied together with this feeling of warmth and comfort, especially with the little boy sprinkling the phrase "I love you" in English whenever he wants to. Both Ohio and Equinox Flower have stunning yet simple cinematography, this visual kind of poetry, if you will. There's this back and forth of conversation with subjects often in the direct centre of the frame, which is wonderfully engaging. Equinox Flower was Yasujiro's first film in colour, and it's set in the same post-war Japan. The plot revolves around the conflict between parents and their children when it comes to traditional views of marriage and how the daughters now wish to make their own decisions and subsequently their own happiness. I found it extremely interesting, and I do look forward to seeing more from Yasujiro Ozu, like Late Spring, Late Autumn, and of course Tokyo Story as mentioned before. I think his films are a perfect starting point if you really want to dive deep into Japanese cinema, or even 50s cinema in general. Witnessing his distinctive style even once is a treat. Jumping forward in time a tiny bit, I also watched Pale Flower, one of the few films I saw that's in black and white, and it's worth noting I watched 3 films total from director Masahiro Shinoda, and I'll get to the other 2 later, but Pale Flower admittedly wasn't my favourite, but Don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it enough. I was mesmerised by Uryo Ikebe's performance, who plays a gangster who is just released from prison. He has to cope with the recent shifts of power between the gangs, whilst also meeting this thrill-seeking woman who wants to gamble. What's super fun is that they're using Hanafuda cards, which was Nintendo's first ever product, founded in 1889. There are many different designs, and now I kind of want some. I couldn't really figure out the rules during the film, but it sparked intrigue, and this is the exact kind of thing I mean when I say a film can be like a time capsule. The smallest of items, objects, events can be a glimpse into the lifestyle at the time. You can see how people would spend their days and conduct conversations alongside what the troubles of the time were. And this is of course exactly why I think watching films from a range of eras is incredibly valuable. Oh, and I definitely recommend this if you like noir films. One other film I watched that was in black and white was Pitfall. I didn't really enjoy it at all, truth be told. It was actually my second least favourite from the month, but you know, the visuals and the ideas were very striking. The film is about a man who wanders into a seemingly deserted town with his son in search of work, and after a bit of bad luck he joins the town's population of lost souls. And to me, with that description, I was expecting a lot more. I thought it was going to be miles creepier, but that's just me. There's still an average of 3.9 on Letterboxd, so perhaps you'll enjoy this one. This is the same director of Woman in the Dunes, which is a critically acclaimed film, so I'll likely still give that one a go sometime. And overall, this does make me want to give 50s and 60s films more of a shot. Now, Demon Pond and The Petrified Forest are both films from the 70s. The Petrified Forest was a film that I was very surprised to like so much because of its slightly lower rating compared to most of the films I chose, and because going in I knew it was going to be very, very bleak. It had some very creepy music that somehow felt full of catastrophe, which was very fitting. The story fundamentally follows a young med student's relationship with his childhood friend and mother. I felt a lot of doom watching this film. I didn't realise I could feel this much hopelessness just viewing a Japanese film from the 70s in my bed. I guess it may not sound enjoyable at all, and maybe I should question my tastes, but it's a film that will stick with me. Demon Pond, on the other hand, follows a lone traveller who stumbles upon a drought-stricken village, and he finds himself engulfed in myth, mystery and magic. In a nearby pond, spirits reside who hold the fate of the town's inhabitants, including lovers Akira and Yuri. And I can tell you for sure that there is plenty of mystery and myth in this. I can certainly also respect a lot of what it did at the time. By the end I wasn't quite sure what I thought of it. Maybe something didn't quite click with me, but I really enjoyed the beginning and how pretty the surrounding nature looked, and the practical aspects were amazing. The scenes look so stage play-like, very mystical, just like a painting, and I can't explain without spoiling the end, but some of the shots later are ridiculously impressive. The film is an adaptation of a 1913 play by Izumi Kyoka, and it features kabuki, a classical form of Japanese theatre. The makeup and costumes are incredible, even more so when you realise that Yuri is played by Tamasaburo Bando, an actor who specialises in female roles mostly on stage. And afterwards I had to take a moment to appreciate and respect this. I was very much in awe once I found out. So even though I didn't like it loads, the style is very much worth noting. When you watch a lot of films one after the other, you really start to realise how varied cinematography, editing and design can be. Seeing how a director would use the medium of film in different time periods for a range of genres is fascinating. And in terms of style, I would say that Shinya Tsukamoto stands out a lot. Bullet Ballet and Tokyo Fist are two very unique films, and of course his distinctive style shows through in plenty of his other works such as Tetsuo and A Snake of June, the former paving the way for the Japanese cyberpunk genre, which leaned more towards industrial and metallic imagery. I love finding films like this, impressively stylish, from an independent director who also acts in their own works. I love it. You can feel the passion radiating off. Bullet Ballet, the first one I saw, is a high contrast black and white film with crazy edits and camera work, following a man who wants to by all means obtain a gun, and he finds himself caught in the middle of violent gangs. I can assume this had a fairly low budget, but either way, the way it's shot makes it quite an emotional and dynamic experience. I actually didn't really like Tokyo Fist as much, only because it was the only one of the month I found quite hard to watch. I unfortunately can't handle certain amounts of gore, and there's a handful of grossly over-the-top violent imagery in this, but it was cool to see a film about boxing. It's funny because I generally don't watch that many films related to sports, but I end up watching a film with boxing, a film with high diving, and a film with golf. Tokyo Fist follows the story of a businessman who runs into a childhood friend who works as a semi-professional boxer, and after a while he begins to suspect that his old friend is having an affair with his fiancée. So he also begins training as a boxer rather rigorously, and there's some intense fighting, let's just say that. Similar to Tsukamoto, Gakuryuu Ishii, formerly known as Sogo Ishii, also heavily influenced the Japanese cyberpunk genre in the 80s with his film Burst City. And I actually started off this challenge by watching his films August in the Water and Angel Dust on the 1st and 2nd. Prior to these, Gakuryuu Ishii hadn't been able to direct a feature film for about 10 years due to financial issues. In the end, August in the Water didn't mesh with me as much as I would have liked, but the film has a super interesting take on the sci-fi genre, whilst also having elements of a coming-of-age story and drama, and plenty of existentialism to boot. This is one of the more tranquil films as well I watched during April. The exceedingly 90s cinematography and style really stuck with me. The atmosphere throughout was actually unsettling in a weird, dreamlike, cosmic yet calming kind of way. I actually felt kind of tense when watching, suddenly being very aware of the universe around you. It always feels like it's closing in on you or something. It's kind of hard to explain. It sounds terrifying, but you know, it's just a film that revolves around a teenage girl who gains supernatural powers after a diving accident. I ended up enjoying the first half of both August in the Water and Angel Dust more, so perhaps Ishii isn't my favourite director, but if you like brainwashing, then Angel Dust is certainly the film for you. Angel Dust follows a police psychologist who suspects her former lover of murders on the subway. And again, I can say with the utmost confidence that the atmosphere that these films emanate is very impressive. They're both very chilling and haunting in different ways. Another filmmaker that had a 10-year hiatus from the industry was Seijun Suzuki. And when I say hiatus, I mean he got blacklisted for basically making the films he wanted to make, and it was even stated that his films were incomprehensible and didn't make any money. His film Branded to Kill from 1967 was an initial critical and commercial failure, after which he got fired from Nikatsu Film Studios. Needless to say, Suzuki sued them, there was controversy, and that's the story of how he got blacklisted for a decade. I didn't learn this fact until after I watched his film A Tale of Sorrow and Sadness from 1977, which I actually chose because the poster really intrigued me. I loved the font, the colours, the composition. It's a film about a rookie golfer who must cope with the stress of fame after a marketing executive transforms her into a sports celebrity. I wasn't sure about the film during the first 20 minutes or so, but to be fair, I was attempting to watch it on a train and there were some shots that I was afraid of the general public accidentally seeing, so I opted to save it and finish it at a later time. When I was watching it later that day, I realised how much I was enjoying it, especially with the 70s clothing worn throughout, and this yellow cube bedroom. I love it. It's so cool. This house in general, I love the design, and then the ending really solidified the enjoyment overall. The fact I didn't know anything going into this film really paid off. Not the same could be said about Tokyo Drifter. For some reason I didn't like it as much, despite it having a higher rating on Letterboxd. But I can't deny the way that the protagonist sings this theme song is absolutely legendary. I was a bit confused at some points watching this, but in general, it's a pretty darn cool film. It even opens in black and white, and, you know, I couldn't go through the month without at least watching one film related to Yakuza. After his gang disbands, a Yakuza enforcer looks forward to life outside of organised crime, but soon must become a drifter after his old rivals attempt to assassinate him. Naturally, Yakuza films are a huge and popular part of Japanese cinema. Takeshi Kitano is a great example for this. He has received humongous praise over the years for his directing, writing and acting. Anyway, sticking to style, near the end of the month, I viewed Survive Style 5+ from 2004, which was a journey. 5 bizarre stories with no apparent connection to one another eventually become intertwined, resulting in surreal circumstances. From what I could see, this film isn't available anywhere in high quality, which is a shame, since the interior design is one of my favourite parts of this film, and since it's a film with style in the title, I'm not surprised. And the way this character's house is decorated for Christmas, it's a dream. Honestly, it's extravagant, fun, there's a very satisfying ending, the lead up was fantastic, and I have such an adoration for ridiculous films like this. Vinnie Jones is in it, and his line, "What's your function in life?" will never leave my memory.
What is your function in life?
Also, the cast is out of this world. All of them are perfect for their respective roles. This film really showcases what can be done with creative freedom and imagination, and it strangely also has some very wholesome themes of accepting yourself and others. It was just fantastic. Obviously, music can heavily tie into the distinctive style of a film. Go, not to be confused with the US film Go, has one of my favourite openings from the month. I loved the editing and how much hype it brings before anything truly begins. It's great. I'm surprised it hasn't been watched by more people. The story follows Sugihara, a Japanese-born North Korean teenager who falls for a prejudiced Japanese girl. The film follows themes of youth, rebellion, identity, love, because this is his love story after all. Featuring Ko Shibasaki, an actress I've grown to like a lot more recently. She featured in Battle Royale, but I was also actually a huge fan of her album Circle Cycle growing up. Lots of nostalgia there. Go, though, feels full of adrenaline, also based on Kazuki Kanashiro's novel of the same name. I also didn't realise that there were North Korean schools in Japan like this, so it was interesting to read up about that afterwards. I feel like there's not loads of films that feature discrimination between Asian countries, so I definitely respect it for that. Before Go, I had actually watched Isao Yukisada's first film, Open House, an even lesser known title with only 687 watches on Letterboxd. This had some extremely pretty visuals, the hazy shots throughout are super dreamy, and the whole subject of loneliness is beautifully portrayed throughout as it follows a struggling model and troubled divorcee in Tokyo. The dog was really cute, and there were just lots of moments that stuck with me, and even though, it's not the best film I've ever seen, being able to reflect, remember, feel emotions from specific elements or visuals is still just as relevant. Isao Yukisada was an assistant director for Shunji Iwai, a director myself and a lot of people are a fan of course his most popular being Lady Chocho. Isao assisted with Swallowtail Butterfly, April Story and Love Letter, and out of Shunji's films I actually watched Hannah and Alice in April, which was the longest film I watched in a month, and perhaps it was a little bit too long for my liking, and I'm not really fond of love triangles either, but I have come to be a fan of actresses Yu Aoi and Anne Suzuki. The film revolves around two teenage best pals attracted to the same boy who is knocked unconscious after walking into a door. The film does have a lot of gaslighting, that's for sure, but still, the friendship, the dancing, the nostalgia and the atmosphere is really lovely. There's also an animated version which is certainly on my watch list now. I also watched Hanging Garden with actress Anne Suzuki, which had some unexpected moments, and the whole thing didn't play out how I imagined it would when first seeing the poster and reading the plot. The film revolves around a family who have promised to share absolutely everything with each other, so no secrets. And even though they appear as a happy family, they all know it isn't actually true. There's quite some nauseating camera work near the start, but it does give off this instant vibe that something isn't quite right. There are many memorable and notable scenes and moments, something I'm glad to have now experienced. To be frank, I played it very safe picking the films I did. A lot of the films I watched had high ratings. The top rated on Letterboxd from the month though was none other than Tampopo. The actor who plays the father in Go is Tsutomu Yamazaki, and of course I had to jump on the opportunity to select Tampopo to watch. It had been on my watch list for literal years. Tampopo follows a pair of truck drivers who find their decrepit shop selling ramen noodles. The widowed owner, named Tampopo, which is dandelion in English, begs the truckers to help her. It's pretty much a love letter to food. There were so many seemingly random scenes, and from here on out I'll never look at a bowl of ramen without thinking of this film. I then also watched Supermarket Woman from the same director, and I'm not sure if this is a common opinion, but I preferred Supermarket Woman over Tampopo. It's a wholesome story that follows a struggling supermarket manager who bumps into an old classmate who then helps him revitalise his business. I think there's something about the humour and style of this movie that clicked with me more, something as regular and common as a supermarket being portrayed in such a colourful, bright, almost cartoonish nature is super fun, and it made me wish that life actually is that way. It's a solid movie, which is also definitely a candidate for a comfort movie, and it will certainly be one of mine. The director Juzo Itami had his wife Nobuko Miyamoto in the main roles, and she brings a lot to both of these movies. By the way, this little dance they do is my absolute favourite. It's a shame that Juzo Itami died in the way he did, in a way that is still seen to be a mystery to this day, but in any case, he's still a director that I'm excited to watch more from. Did you know it was my birthday in April? Yeah, it was. And I watched the worst rated film on the list on this day with a rating of 2.8. On the 22nd, after having a splendid day out and celebrating with cake, I sat down, put my headphones on, and watched The X from Outer Space. Oh, what a delightful movie. Perhaps not the best introduction to Japanese monster movies though. It also didn't make me feel scared at any point despite being a horror, and it got some laughs out of me despite not being a comedy. But there is something wonderfully strange about old films that experimented like this. I watched the subbed version, not the English dubbed, and in the version I saw there are some Japanese dubbed parts for the foreign characters, and it's kind of just goofy. It's kind of off. I don't know, I also have no idea what the English dubbed version is like. But anyway, there were some really charming parts. For example, when there was the clear use of miniatures, or the strings holding up the planes, and just the practical effects in general. I am such a sucker for that sort of thing. I love seeing the old techniques used like this, and I wouldn't change those parts for anything. So that was my 29th birthday experience. In comparison to the 2.8 rating, we have one again that's a bit higher with an average of 4.1, which is Welcome Back Mr. McDonald, which also was hands down in the top 3 of the month for me, maybe even number 1. I absolutely loved this film, I even watched it twice. The film is about an ordinary housewife whose script is going to be broadcast as a radio drama, but almost everyone among the crew insists on changing various parts of the play to their liking. It starts off with a simple character name change, and then it just escalates from there. I really find it fun when a film takes place in one room or one specific location throughout the entirety of the story, and I find it impressive when it works well. This film is also so funny, and as a bonus, Ken Watanabe essentially reprises his role as the truck driver from Tampopo, which I can only assume is a homage to Juzo Itami, so I'm relieved I saw Tampopo prior to this. There's not a boring moment whatsoever, the writing is intelligent and comedic in my eyes. I could likely watch it over and over again. The film with the least view count total was Deaths in Tokimeki by director Yoshimitsu Morita, and this had 433 logs at the time of watching. This was a very strange film with a shocking finale, which obviously I won't spoil, but it's minimalistic and surprisingly chill for the most part. For a film about a hitman, he's kind of monotone in nature, and the whole experience feels very haunting and bizarre. The fact he doesn't show that much emotion makes the ending that much more impactful. It's not the best film on the list, but there were certainly some intriguing aspects, and this particular shot that goes around the car is genuinely very cool and impressive. It goes around the whole car like a complete 360, it's very, very cool. Another film in my top 3 from the month was again a 90s film called Suzuki. This was the only one to make me cry, not sob uncontrollably or anything, but I shed a few tears at the end. It's one of those films that some people may regard as boring, but I really like this kind of pacing and the lesser amounts of dialogue. It's a quiet film, but also tackles very emotional subjects, and also I'd like to note that this was one of the few films directed by a female director in this list. I was extremely sad near the end of the month to reflect and notice that I had hardly watched any films from female directors. There is certainly a distinct lack of female directors all over the world. There's probably this long list of the history and the reasons why this has ended up the case, and I can only hope that there is an increase in female directed movies. Suzuki, a directorial debut by the way, is shot in a really gorgeous, quietly powerful way. taking place in a remote Japanese village. The only professional actor during the filming was Jun Kunimura, and at the time this was Machiko Ono's first film, and she went on to have more of a successful acting career later. Naomi Kawase also directed Still the Water, which I watched years ago actually, and also The Morning Forest and others. 1 Million Yen Girl was another favourite, and another directed by a woman, and also the latest released film I ended up watching being from 2008. A 21-year-old girl is released from prison, and due to gossip and family conflicts, she decides to save 1 million yen in order to move to where nobody knows her, and then repeats the process. It's a film about searching for self-identity, if you will, and it also made me want to go outside and explore. Iwai does an amazing job as the main role, and it seems like most of the crew were female for this film, which is great. This film really shows the beauty of life, yet the common experience of feeling lost in your 20s, and perhaps also that feeling like you don't really fit in anywhere, but how people just continue on moving forward. And this one personally resonated with me, and similar to Suzuki, I think both of them have this place in my heart now, and they will for a very long time. Some other examples of female-directed Japanese movies are Helter Skelter, Rent a Cat, Fatal Frame, Under the Open Sky, and Bread of Happiness, and some animated films as well, such as A Silent Voice. Tezuko Sakane was the first Japanese female director, with Kinuyo Tanaka being the second, which I admit I haven't heard of their names before up until this point, so I'm definitely going to make sure I remember them from now on. What surprised me about director Yoshimitsu Morita, who directed Deaths and Tokimeki, is that the day after I watched a different film from him called Haru. It was almost hard to believe that this was the same director, and I'd actually also watched another film from him years ago called Main Theme, which had more like cool city poppy vibes from what I can remember. And what I can surmise is that the atmosphere this director creates in his movies is always kind of very intriguing, so I definitely want to watch other films from him. But anyway, Haru was in my top 10 for sure. It's one of those films that again feels like hopping into a time machine. The story focuses on a woman who joins an online movie forum and develops a special bond with another user when writing emails back and forth. Sometimes 90s movies didn't really showcase the internet in a positive light, kind of like Pulse or something, but Haru was a moving story predominantly showing the internet as a new form of communication, and it's heavily relatable if you've even made one friend on the internet before. And as someone who met their partner online, this film made me feel things. The film also unconventionally places emails on the screen for the audience to see and read for themselves, and the fact that the forum centered around movies is also really fitting and a fun choice, showing how humans can connect over a shared interest. I'm also a sucker for films that are shot on 35mm. Similar to Haru, 20th century nostalgia focuses on two people finding each other within the crazy universe. The story revolves around two teenagers making a film where they are aliens. The boy then moves to Australia and the girl is left to edit and finish the film by herself. It actually all was very sweet. I wasn't a huge fan of the music and singing parts, but the visuals are beautiful. I think some of them are at least colour graded, but these shots have such a gorgeous tone to them. The whole film is insanely heartwarming, and I think we all just need to see heartwarming films every once in a while. I was very much into the equipment they were using too, and the passion they had when making their film. This film just shows that being yourself is important. From the early 2000s, we also have Linda, 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 perhaps the most motivating and light-hearted film on the list. A band has to recruit a new lead vocalist right before their high school festival. They decide on a Korean exchange student and they do their best to learn 3 songs together, one being an 80s pop song, Linda, Linda, hence the film name. This is a film by Nobuhiro Yamashita, whose film A Gentle Breeze in the Village is a very delicate and wonderful slice-of-life film. Linda, Linda, Linda shares that joy of music and instruments, and that kind of thing will always bring me happiness, and throw in a school setting and you're just in for some really nostalgic vibes. The girl on the drums is Aki Maeda, whose performance I really enjoyed in Battle Royale, which keeps coming up now. And there's also Shiori Sekine on the bass, who is actually a professional bassist for the band Baseball Bear. She even posted a picture of Linda, Linda, Linda recently on Instagram because of the 20-year anniversary of the film's release. She writes, I was 19 before I debuted with my band. Now everywhere I go, people will say, I love that movie, and it makes me really happy. So if you like Japanese movies, if you like light-hearted, coming-of-age movies about friends, music, nostalgia, then, I say put this on your watch list. Loved Gun and The Story of Poo Poo are both from director Kensaku Watanabe, and the latter is a very strange film. Not a bad thing, just weird. But we all need unpredictable, unique, experimental, surreal films in this world. Films that throw you off guard. This film certainly does that. It follows these two girls on a journey, and on the way they meet some eccentric characters, and I wasn't sure what to expect at all, and it was indeed full of nonsense, but also rather sweet by the end. It was an experience. I liked it, and I was excited to watch Loved Gun because it features one of my favourite actresses, Aoi Miyazaki. Essentially, the film follows a story about a hitman who carries a distinctive red gun, and honestly, there are parts in the film that are really original and honestly kind of surreal. It's very cool, and I love the soundtrack too. There are occasional surreal aspects, such as bullets changing colours depending on emotion, and this unconventional, stylised nature of this Hitman story makes it stand out from a lot of other Hitman films. In a good or bad way, it's more up to your preferences. I thought it was in a good way. Not my favourite from the month, but I'm really happy I saw this. And last but not least, on the 30th of April, the 30th film I chose was Forbidden Siren. I hadn't watched horror at all really, apart from The X from Outer Space, if you can count that. You know, I thought it would be fitting for my channel to at least watch one film that's a video game adaptation. It was honestly not too bad. I don't really like video game adaptations all that much. Tomb Raider from 2001 with Angelina Jolie being my exception for some reason. But yeah, Siren wasn't all too scary. I got scared by a bug more than anything else, but I will say I'm pretty impressed with the story, and the twist reveal at the end is done pretty well, and I applaud it also for its creativity despite its low budget. I think it's a film worth giving a shot if you're into Japanese horror or if you like the game. I think the game series is super cool and interesting. I haven't played it myself, but I've watched numerous playthroughs and videos on it, and yeah, it's just terrifying, but also really cool. And side note, I noticed the director made a film called Egg about a woman who sees an egg every time she closes her eyes, so perhaps I will add that to my watch list. And those were the 30 Japanese films I watched in April. So there were some patterns, you know, clearly I like 90s and 2000s films. Feel free to follow me on Letterboxd if you wish. I really loved doing this because I've been struggling to actually sit and watch films consistently for a few years now, and to have a month where I basically watched one every day was extremely revitalising and something I would love to do again. And I was thinking of doing this for maybe different genres like animation or more countries. I would love to pick more countries. So if there's anything in particular you would want to see, let me know. I also have a Patreon page up and I'm trying my best to post there more consistently. And yeah, that was April. That was all the films I watched, and I hope to see you again here soon. Bye!
What is your function in life?